Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Happy Friday. Hi, Jeremy.
Yes, indeed. Although it isn't Friday today, is it? In all transparency.
Again, will it ever be Friday?
Will it ever be Friday? We never seem to get there. A bit of a pre-record, but we're still here. We're still here. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation. And this week, we're going to talk a bit about diversity, a bit about workspaces. And to kick things off, as always, we have the news. So this is pretty interesting, Ben. I think you picked up on this. It's a bit of a Lloyd's... So women working in leadership roles within the Lloyd's market.
Yep. So Lloyd set some targets, and they've been going through the progress of this. And the upshot is that what they're saying is 17, I think, out of 58 businesses in Lloyd's that they're monitoring has achieved a 35% of women in leadership positions. So this is the top kind of board executive level positions. It's not the middle and lower grades of people, grades of management. So they're saying there's progress. The overall market progress is slow actually, but it's plus 2% from the year ago, 32% across the market as a whole. I think the interesting thing is they've named the organisations and the ones that have achieved it, and there are some pretty big names on there: Beazley, Hiscox, Extra Excel. So that's why, although it's a smallish proportion, I think, of the total number, some of the big ones are achieving this, and I think that's maybe because they have got more definite policies and are really kind of striving, and they're also listed companies, so it may well be that they've got to do more in terms of their governance around that. So this is kind of good news. Long way to go, and I think Lloyd says that too. Well, they say some way to go. I say a long way to go, but because certainly we look at these sort of data at all levels, and I think we would say that in lots of parts of the market, the gender balance is still way too much in favour of men.
Yeah, and this isn't a fluffy HR topic, is it? I mean, this is rooted in business success. I think the next slide kind of shows this, doesn't it?
Yes, and I think that's where we should start to talk now and have a look at this, and we will be looking at it. So this is a piece that was done or published by Harvard Business Review, but it was also done in conjunction, I believe, with Boston Consulting Group. And it's one of the few quantitative studies done in the last few years anyway around what makes for successful transformation. Look, all businesses are in some sort of transformation. So I think this is, change, if you like. And these are the 6 top factors. The first 3, or the first 2 may not be too, or the first 3 may not be too surprising. So employee pay, stock options, so having a stake in the business, obviously, satisfaction of those employees, which you might say is a byproduct of all the rest of it. But D&I, women managers and women employees. Now, these are quantitative factors, so they've taken them as kind of independent variables, if you like, and looked at them against all the other variables and said that these things. So having women in these businesses, having a gender balance, in other words, is very important. And this data is correlated against shareholder returns. So it's not, as you say, a fluffy measure. This is, and they've got great examples in this article of companies that have achieved it and done it and how they've done it. So I think we need to talk about not just, hey, we've got a number that we're achieving here. I think we need to start to talk about what does a business look like that is getting it right around performance of people. And basically, although I've just focused on women and we've come from the Lloyd's piece, really what they're saying is the more you focus on the people and the type of employee engagement, that's kind of what's really, really important. So the implications of the findings are clear. Companies have a better chance of success if they focus on their people during transformation. I suppose it's something we've always known, but it's very important.
Yeah, certainly when I was running the strategic HR network all those years ago, before the 2008 financial crisis, I mean, this was commonly known in the HR fraternity, although they may not have had the figures, this kind of really good data to back it up. But I mean, it goes beyond as well transformation, doesn't it? If you look at high performing teams and high performing cultures within organizations, you can see that it's a diversity in its widest sense, diversity of thought, as well as all the other variations of it that allow creative conversations and competitive advantage and those ideas that really push the organization forward to come up to the surface. I think it's so important.
And that's why boiling it down to a number is not great. I think the numbers are very important, but I think the understanding of what it means for an organization and how that works. And I was just reflecting on when we had on the underwriter ranking and the moment when the women were getting the awards on the night, it was quite a big moment, and there was a sense then, and I think we've had that sense over the last few years, that this is something that needs to change and people want to change. So there's a real desire for that. I think that more leadership needs to get it, and I don't think Lloyd's would have any problem with us saying that. I think that's a real call now, because this is about performance. It isn't just about, look, we've got to tick some box.
Good. So let's move on. So e-trading report. This is really fascinating. This is a study that you've done, Ben, into e-trading. Just give us a bit of background, and then we can go into some of the numbers on it.
Right. So we do a big study it's in association with BIBA, the British Insurance Brokers Association. It's 500 or 600 interviews, pretty big, with placing brokers, and it's part of a bigger study around service and reputation, of insurers. But this was a hot topic, if you like, that we looked at, which was, are you e-trading? And we wanted to determine that. So this is a special report that we've just produced off the back of that. It doesn't give you all the data, it just gives you some of the data. And the findings are interesting. So really, we've got about 70% of brokers are e-trading on a regular basis. 68%, whatever it is. And that is great. There's always been this sort of, brokers are often Luddites. They don't embrace technology, but that's definitely not true in the UK regions. So technology is really quite widespread in that market. And the problem really is where we get into asking about out of scope. So does the computer say no effectively? And a lot of brokers, 60%, do say that is a problem. And so this is something that if you could stop this kind of clunkiness or get rid of it, if the carriers could do this, it would seem to us and other people we've spoken to that e-trading really could be a way out of the resource and cost issue that a lot of insurers have when trading smaller standard risks. And there's a page within the report where a company called Polaris talks about who do the standards in here. They're a bit like Accord in the London market, but they set the standards with the insurers around a lot of the risks that go onto e-trading platforms. They say that, well, there are lots of issues, but one of the key ones is that they feel that e-trading could cover more and more complex risks, but you need to have some human intervention. So again, it's back to our sweet spot: get the balance right, get the human intervention right, and don't just leave it to work on its own, because it creates problems. Anyway, this report is out and available, and it'll be up on the InsurIndex site, and we'll be promoting it. But it's just a start, really, of what will be quite a lot of work into this as to what the particular issues are. And it's a good example of really collaboration, actually, which is getting brokers and insurers to work together and say, okay, so what if we did this and what if we did this, and then we could get this really to work. That's what I'm hoping for. And but yes, it's a big deal, I think, generally speaking, e-trading.
And do you think those problems with the computer saying no, is that just because they haven't quite ironed out the process, or they haven't invested in the right tech, or do you get any sense of why it's kind of falling over so much?
There's a few things. There's a lot of platforms. I think that's the thing to discuss. There are lots and lots of different platforms that brokers have to deal with, which is one thing. But I guess we all deal with lots of different technologies these days. Yeah. The one of the key issues, I think, is that is just the kind of, imagine that you've got a conveyor belt with a product. You often in those manufacturing environments have a person who will just check and pick out the odd one that doesn't work. So I think there's a bit of that needed. There's an example given by one of the people we were speaking to around one of the experts in this area, saying that in Canada they do that. The underwriters just look at every single risk briefly, very quickly, but it's part of the process. Most of them just go through on the nod, but lots, quite a few get picked up and then they're managed. The other thing is really about the standards and the questions that are asked around particular risks. So that's the other area where there needs to be streamlining, and there arguably needs to be more agreement on standardized wordings and questions, really. And I think that's difficult for the standards people to do that because they're just doing their job. But it probably is symptomatic of individual underwriting teams almost saying, well, that's our USP because we asked that question, and therefore we get a better return, as opposed to, come on, let's be honest, guys, you all do this is pretty much the same product the world over. Let's just get it standardized. And there's some criticism as well, I think, of basically insurers just saying, great, you either do this e-trade or you don't do it. And if it gets declined, that's end of story. But that doesn't really work in the real world, because it leaves brokers in a very, very difficult position to on each individual transaction. But over time, it just erodes trust, I think. So I think that can't be the situation. I think most risks need to be considered up to the point at which they have to be, not declined or underwritten. But these are standard risks, so they should be able to be written in most instances. Yeah.
No, interesting. Yeah, it'd be good to see that, Ben. And so when's that coming out? That's coming out next week.
About now, actually. Yeah. So we'll put the link. We can put the links in the on the LinkedIn, maybe.
Okay. Good stuff. Excellent. Right. Thanks for that. So I wanted to talk about, everyone will know if you work in Lloyd's that the underwriting room is closed for refurbishment. It closed this week, closed on Friday last week. This week starts and back open in September. And there's quite a lot of social media around kind of the redevelopment of the room and how it's going to undergo a transformation. And I'd say in a positive light that they have done a pretty big piece of work in terms of asking the market kind of what they want from the underwriting room, where it adds value, and how they're going to then redesign it and bring it up to, I guess, a standard that they think will encourage collaboration and trading. I think what it does do is kind of just exemplifies the difficult nature of our working lives and the working environments that we put together in the shape of offices. And we've talked about this bit in the past. This is just one of the slides from that piece of consultation that they did. And they talk a lot about that. I've just highlighted, so a place for doing business, a place for collaboration. It's a marketplace for people. So a lot of talk about people there and coming together. And then on the other hand, you've got the Blueprint 2, which is looking at the digital trading and making it the most advanced marketplace in the world. So you could say these two things go hand in hand. You've got a move towards digital, and at the same time you are upgrading the physical environment in order to make the whole experience of trading in Lloyd's better. I think for me, when I read through this consultation, it does kind of draw out the tensions between a completely digital working environment and a totally face-to-face one, and how do you get that hybrid thing to work, and you can extend that through to individual organizations, our organizations, how we work and how we collaborate. And I think it does come down to I think two things I'd say is like the culture of the organization. So it's very difficult in Lloyd's because there's a number of different organizations coming together to work and collaborate. So you haven't got one homogeneous kind of leadership and everyone working the same way, in the same way they compete and in some ways they collaborate. And the other side of it is, there isn't a right and a wrong. There's not a work from home or a work from the office. There isn't a 2 days a week, 3 days a week. It's about roles, responsibilities, and I guess it then comes down to we talked about this before, the purpose of the organization and how connected you feel to that. And I think it probably goes deeper than just the environment, the physical environment that you work in, and the tech that you use to do your job. There's some emotional connection that we're trying to establish, and it's been disrupted through COVID and everything else. So it's just a really interesting time, and it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out.
I think it is, and I think some of the things that you can read between the lines there are the future is about collaboration, not necessarily about the box. I think that's saying that and more like broker lounges, so more of this informal type of environment where people do meet and chat. And I suppose, perhaps rightly, they're saying that you need a big space in the centre of the market to achieve that, but it doesn't necessarily have to work on the old kind of rigid box-based system, and has a bit of digital and everything else thrown in. And the issue I think the challenging one there, as the one I'd probably challenge a bit, is the only way is to be in face-to-face environments. I think this is a bit what Liebel was saying and has come through. And I don't doubt that face-to-face is important and works, but that was historically what everybody has done. But I was talking about some research the other day that said that people who are in, very regularly, most of the week, versus people who are pretty much always remote working, both those groups are very connected. But the middle group of people who are sort of neither one nor the other, if you like, or a bit of home work, they're not very connected. So they haven't really got any kind of regular kind of feeling of being part of that business for some reason. And I think that's really, really interesting. So, and we've heard that, Jez, haven't we? And basically where people have said, in a lot of IT, insurtech businesses have said, oh, well, we're absolutely comfortable working from remotely all the time. We don't need to come in because we have established that as a way of working. So I don't really necessarily buy into that argument. I do understand that face-to-face can be better for sales and things, and I'm one of those people. But equally, I can see that there is a strong and objective argument that says you can work completely remotely. So this is a challenge for any organisation that has a great big building in the middle of London.
Yeah, you're right.
That they're committed to for the next 10 years. Yeah, they kind of knew what the conclusion was going to be before they started. But I do commend them for going through the process and the thinking. It's good that, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, won't it? When we all come back and see how many people are in there. And they're saying it's critical mass, aren't they? That's really what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think you're right. It's critical mass and actually attracting people into work. Yeah. So I think one of the comments that caught my eye was from an estate agent, an office estate agent, similar to Savills that we spoke to during the pandemic. And they were saying you need to kind of treat your employees like customers and entice them back.
Yeah.
If that's what you want, So perhaps that's part of that strategy, but I think it is only part of it. And there needs to be something quite solid and deep in terms of purpose and connection that you've just been talking about there, for it to actually work. But yeah, it will be, like you say, the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
And in this case, the pudding is to quote Alan Partridge, and in this case, the pudding is an office in London.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. So we will see. I mean, we're already monitoring this. So if Lloyd wants to talk to me about it, we're already measuring it, and we have been for the last few years. So we know a lot about it and we know how it compares. So arguably, a lot of this is really about what you might call the CX journey. And when it comes down to it, is to say, where do you want to do business and how do you want to do it and how can we make it easier? It could be a digital journey. I mean, it clearly isn't a digital journey now, because what people do is they just go home on a laptop. But in a more sophisticated world in the future, you could say, well, all that trading could be done from wherever, we've got e-trading systems coming in. We just talked about e-trading. The world is changing for sure in that respect. And if risks are simple to auto-quote, why would you necessarily bother to come into London? Could be good reasons, but a lot of people say I don't need to. That's a challenge.
It is. Good. Excellent. Right. Thanks for that, Ben. Right. Let's finish off with a bit of sport. So the Tour de France is absolutely fascinating, enthralling, brilliant, very close as well. Hope you've been watching it and enjoying it.
Really good. Yeah, it's very good. It's sad about Cavendish going out, but there we are. He might come back next year. I really think it's amazing how science, if you like, has played such a part. That now they are incredibly, I don't, from what I can tell, they're not taking drugs anymore, but the science has overtaken that in the sense that they can monitor everything to the last millimeter, or even whatever it's smaller than a millimeter, micrometer, nanometer, electron, I don't know what, atom, that, they can, you can just perfectly measure it. And yet all that's done, and then you still have the surprises of these kids basically who weigh nothing at all and go up mountains at the speed I go on the flat. Yeah, absolutely incredible stuff. And we got the tennis, and of course we won the cricket as well at the weekend. So still in the cricket. That was good. That was really good. Yeah, that was all good fun. Super. Right. Anything lined up this weekend, Ben? Any plans? Yes. Paddle boarding. Oh, good. Make sure you take sport. I think it's a pastime, maybe sport, hobbyist. Pastime, yeah. Make sure you get some GoPro footage of you falling in. I will, yeah. I mean, I have been already. I've just got a lesson this week, so my wife bought me some lessons for my birthday, but I had already been paddleboarding, and I said, why do I need a lesson? I can already do it. But anyway, that's what I'm doing. So yeah, but apparently paddleboarding now is like amazingly, I mean, it's obviously amazingly popular, but also people are going further and further distances. They're like crossing oceans on these paddleboards. I was at the beach. I was in Deal, which is on the south coast. And this guy came in on a paddleboard, and he was going fairly fast. You came, watched him come around the headland, and he said he'd paddleboarded from Whitstable, which is bloody miles away. Well, that's what I'm saying, is they are doing further, longer and longer distances on these paddleboards. It's like a sort of trekking thing. It's amazing. Yeah. Well, there we go. So I can go about 20 minutes, and then I've got to come in because I start to wobble a bit. Yeah, start to get sea legs. Oh. Good. Right, so we'll have Bolton's barbecue tips and also paddleboarding. Yeah. Paddleboarding special. Paddleboarding special, exactly. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Excellent. Right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We shall see you next week, probably live, hopefully live. And enjoy the weekend, everybody. And